Okay, today we're going to start covering Chapter 9, and we're going to look at local governments. This first recording that you're going to watch is going to be 15 minutes long, and so if it seems like it just comes to a quick stop, it's because I was running out of time, and so then there will be a second one, and you'll continue watching the second video. Now, if I go to Microsoft Word and I type something in on Microsoft Word, act like I'm writing it on the marker board and you're writing it in your notes. So if I type it in Microsoft Word, you have to write it in your notes just as if I was putting it on the marker board. Okay? So here we go.
Hey man, you know what?
Chapter 9 talks about local government. Section 1 looks at the units of local government. Section 2, town, township, and village governments. Section 3, city governments. And Section 4, how governments work together. So, in Section 1, we are going to look at units of local government, and our objectives for Section 1 are: how are local governments established and why are they needed? How did the county system of government begin in the U.S.? And how is county government organized, and what are the main purposes of each level of county government? So, for the first objective that's going to look at local governments. First of all, local governments are established and given powers from the state governments. Let's say you have a subdivision. It started out as maybe just 3 or 4 houses, and then a couple more houses were added, and a couple more, and a couple more. And now next thing you know, you have a subdivision of 50, 60, 70 homes. These people decide that, you know what, they have enough homes. Instead of everybody always kind of having to do everything for themselves, maybe they want to become a village or a township or something like that, and they want to form their own local government. In order for that to happen, they have to apply for what is called a charter. They get this from the state. So those people would get organized, they would fill out the proper paperwork, and they would submit that application for a charter to the state legislature. A charter is a basic plan for local government. It is to local government what a constitution is to the U.S. or to a state. A constitution is basically a blueprint, says this is how the government's going to function. A charter is pretty much the same thing. It tells the local government, this is what you are responsible for doing. This is what you have to provide for the people. So, you have the people, they apply for a charter to the state. The state replies back, says, yes, we're going to grant you a charter. In that charter, it's going to tell them there are certain services you must provide for your citizens. Some examples. I'm not saying these are all of the services. These are examples of services. First of all, your local government has to maintain roads. If the road's in bad condition, they need to maintain it. If there's potholes, they need to fix them. If it's a gravel road, they need to grade it, try to smooth it out. If it has to be repaired, they have to come in and do that. And they do that at their expense. They don't charge the people if they are fixing the road. Now, if they are creating a road or they are upgrading it dramatically, going from, say, gravel to pavement, then, depending on how the local charter is set up, the city can do one of two things. They can either say, you know what, everybody in this town is going to drive on this road at some point, so everybody in the town is going to be responsible for paying for this road. And so they figure out what the total cost is, how many households are there in town, and they divide the cost by the households, and that's how much money each household owes. In other communities, like the community of Pierce, they say, we are going to charge the people that live on that road. Now, if you don't live on the road, that's great. You don't owe any money. However, if you do live on the road, you have to pay. And how much you pay depends on how much property you have that is along that road. If you don't have very much, if you only have 40 or 50 feet, it might only cost you a few $1,000s. If you have, say, 100, 120, 30 feet, it might cost you 12, 13, $14,000. It just depends. Cities can set that up however they want. Running water. The cities are going to provide running water for the people. In the town of Pierce, for example, Pierce has about 5 wells throughout the town, depending on where they're at, if they're on the west end of town or the east end of town or the south side or the north side. They might go 80, 90 feet deep, or they might go a couple 100 feet deep. They have to go deep enough so that they get to water, but then just because they get it doesn't mean they're going to stop there, because in some years that are very dry, like back in 2012, that water level is going to drop as people are using water, but Mother Nature's not replenishing it. So they have to make sure that those wells go deep enough so that they don't run dry. Those wells then are powered by electricity. They pump the water up. It goes to the water tower. From the water tower, it then goes to the homes in the town of Pierce. Sewage systems. You have a house, you live in the town of Pierce. When you have to use the toilet, you flush it. What's in there leaves the house. It goes into the sewer lines. From the sewer lines, it eventually ends up in what are called collection ponds. The town of Pierce has two collection ponds that are just south of the town. If you know where Casey's at, I'm sure all of you know where Casey's is. If you head south of Casey's on that asphalt road, you go across the bridge, and then on the south side of on the east side of the road, excuse me, or on the left-hand side, you're going to see a fence. And then you're going to see some of these mounds of grass, or this long mound of grass. Well, on the other side of that mound is one of several collection ponds. Now, it's fenced off, and there are signs there that say no trespassing, because it's not like Gilman Park where you can go out there and you can get a paddle boat and go in the paddle boat, or you can put a canoe in there, or you can go fishing in there. You're not going to want to do that. I'm not saying you couldn't put a boat in there. I don't think you're going to want to do that. And I don't think you're really going to want to go fish in there, because the only thing you're probably going to catch is a brown trout or a log salmon. And then if you catch one of those, I really don't know how you're going to clean it, and I really don't think you're going to want to eat it. So the best thing is just stay out of there, because there's raw sewage in there. Now, moving on. Sidewalks. Communities must provide sidewalks for the people that live there. In most communities, if you go from the curb and you go roughly 15 feet in, that is city property. Now, the people that own that stretch, they're responsible for maintaining that. So for example, if you have the curb and then some grass and then a sidewalk, you're responsible for mowing that grass and keeping it picked up. Let's say that you don't have a sidewalk on your property. Then all of a sudden the city decides, you know what, they need a sidewalk there. Even though the city is going to build it, you are the ones that are responsible for paying for it. When it snows, you're responsible for going out there and making sure the snow is off of the sidewalk. You might think, well, if it's actually city property, if they own it, they should come around and clean it. It just doesn't work that way, and that's part of a city charter. That's how it's set up. Street cleaning. Town of Pierce does not do a lot of this. Mother Nature is going to do most of it. You get a real heavy rainfall, it just washes everything right down the street. But from time to time, though, you get a lot of leaves that will collect along the curbs, things like that, especially in the springtime. If we've had a lot of snow in the wintertime and they've put a lot of gravel down at intersections, eventually that gravel is just going to sit there. Or you get some rain, it might get washed along the curb, but then it's just going to sit there. So the town of Pierce has a couple of, or actually they have one street cleaner, and it doesn't get used very often, but several times a year they will break it out and they will clean the streets with it. A lot of times they're going to do this in the spring when it looks like we're done with snow and stuff like that. Get all of that gravel picked up, anything that might have collected in the streets over the winter time, all that's going to get picked up. And then trash collection. Again, towns can do what they want to do. They can either have their own equipment and people that go around and pick it up, or they can do what Pierce does, and Pierce actually contracts this out to someone else. There's a business in Pierce, and that their job is go around and collect the trash. So once a month, your household will get a bill from the city of Pierce, and on that you're going to pay for your water, you're going to pay for your electricity, and one of the other things you're going to pay for is trash collection. Okay, now as far as electricity is concerned, we've said before that in countries like the United States, competition is what really makes our economy run. Different businesses competing against one another. However, when it comes to something like electricity, it's best if you only have one provider. Now, the government knows that, so they will set limits. They'll tell a power company that we know you're the only one providing this town with power, but that doesn't mean you can just charge whatever you want. It has to be reasonable. And so the government does watch over that. So for example, the town of Pierce, we get our electricity from the Elkhorn Public Power District. Our electricity actually comes to Pierce from the town of Battle Creek. So there could be something that could happen over by Battle Creek, and it can disrupt the electricity we get here. Sometimes it happens that way. If you go just out by the golf course, they get their electricity from Wayne County. So depending on where you're at, depending on what district you are in as far as electrical provider is concerned, will determine where it comes from. And something we're going to talk about later on in this chapter is special districts, what they are, and what purpose they serve. In the meantime, we're going to continue on. Now, another thing that some towns will do is they will have what are called ordinances. And an ordinance is a regulation that governs a community. It's like a law for that community. And this may be something it only applies to your community. For example, one ordinance that Pierce has, and some of you have probably seen these signs, is that it says that it is illegal for trucks to use their engine brake. Well, what's an engine brake? It just simply means as a semi is coming into town, they're just going to downshift, and instead of applying the brake, that's what slows the truck down. The thing is, it makes a lot of noise. And so if you are a homeowner and you live right on the highway, right on the edge of town, you might have trucks that are driving through town at 2, 3 in the morning, and they use their jake brake and boom, it wakes you up. Well, that can be a nuisance. So what they say is you can't do that. If you get caught, if law enforcement, if police happen to be right there and a truck uses your engine brake, boom, they just violated a town ordinance and they can get a fine for it. Okay, this concludes our first 15 minutes. So I'm going to stop this, and then you will listen to the rest of this on the next one.